handle the truth.
The Denise Simon Experience. The Truth Matrix. Vetting, exposing, drilling down to the truth.
Rolling Thunder, this is Hitman, Seat, over. Hitman, this is Rolling Thunder, Seat out.
The Denise Simon Experience. Exposing politics, lies, demagoguery, spin, fraud.
Grid to suppress, Mike Charlie, 4 tree 5, 9er 2 1. Grid to mark, Mike Charlie, 4 7 tree 9er, 8 9er, out.
Promoting individual situational awareness. Question, probe, notice, ask why.
Mark smoke on the deck, 2 rounds HEPT, gas TOT 5-3.
And now, the Denise Simon Experience.
And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Denise Simon Experience. Gonna really change gears here because we're gonna talk about minimum wage, and I have the distinct pleasure of having David Kreutzler with us, who is the Senior Research Fellow at Heritage Foundation for Labor, Markets, and Trade. I don't think there could be a better person that I could have tapped on the shoulder and then agreed to be with us, because there was an interesting piece that David co-wrote about minimum wage and how it's killing some jobs in some areas around the country. So, David, thanks for your time on the Denise Simon Experience.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
So we know that, in some places we're at $8 something an hour, we're at $11 an hour, at $15 an hour. I mean, it's kind of like some companies are declaring their own increases in minimum wage. Others are a little slower to do it. Others are not doing it at all. But the progressives, not only do they think it ought to be 15 and even necessarily go higher, but now we have some cities, municipalities that are, they're putting people on a salary without even working, right?
Yeah, there are all kinds of options. There are a lot of politicians think that they can legislate the laws of economics, and they can't. The companies can pay only as much as the worker will produce, and if you pay more than the output you get from your workers, eventually you're going to go out of business. And so that's the problem. What we need is policies to help companies be more profitable so that they can pay more and to get the workers to develop better skill sets. But other than that, you simply can't legislate wealth.
Minimum wage was never designed to be a living, thriving pay grade, correct?
Well, I think different people have different goals for it. But yeah, whatever their goal is, you can't make people rich by legislating a higher minimum wage. Because we know that. I mean, it would be nice if we could. We certainly want people to make more money. We don't want people to live in poverty. But we see what happens when people raise these wages above what businesses can afford to pay, is that they hire fewer people. And the ones the first ones to lose the jobs or not be hired are the ones that have the worst skill set. That is, the people at the bottom rung of the ladder. And so the ones we want to help most are the ones that are hurt most by minimum wage increases.
David, if I was to say, because I remember some days in the telecommunications business, so if I was to say that if unemployment is $8.25 an hour or if it's $15 an hour, that's actually not the end of what it costs the employer to have that employee on the payroll per hour, is it?
Oh, no. The wage that we see, and even not just low wage workers, but all of us, the cost of the benefits and the taxes that the employer has to pay, could probably add 50% to what the wage that the workers see.
So, and I also called them the sick, lame, and lazy because, there's an awful large sector out there of employees. Well, they may be getting $8.50 an hour, $9 an hour. They're only necessarily producing, in some cases, $5 or $6 an hour. So somebody else has got to make up that void, correct?
Well, it could be, but what will happen is they will simply not get hired. You'll go get the people that do the $7, $8, $9, $10 an hour's worth of work, and that's a problem. So to the extent that we have people whose productivity isn't up to minimum wage, or certainly not $15 an hour, and we want them to get there, we need them perhaps to develop the soft skills, which are things like the attitude, being able to show up Monday morning even after you've watched the late Sunday night football game, and things like that. And I don't think we want to create economic policies that are focused on hiring the working to the lowest common denominator, but we also don't want to forget those people. The problem with higher minimum wages is that it doesn't actually help them. We want to come up with policies that actually work for these people. What does it take to get them to where they will be productive? Is it do they need to understand simply the skill sets of showing up for work and being willing to do that? Do they need more math skills? Were they left out in high school and elementary school? Did they not get the communication skills, the ability to write, or whatever it is? That's what we need to work on. We can't fix that by saying employers have to pay $10 or $15 or $20 an hour.
Very happy you kind of went there, because that was actually going to be one of my questions to you, David. And I would say that where education came from and where it is today, given the syllabus and certainly Common Core, students are being taught to be hireable in what is defined as industries of the future and not any other kind of workplace. So your normal, the literature, if you wanted to be, some kind of a teacher or, some kind of history, those are kind of set aside in order to go more towards data, more towards math, more towards science, which would require, I would say, higher pay grades, but yet not every student has those DNA cells within them to kind of be ramped into those industries, correct?
Well, and it's more than that. Some of them simply don't want to do it. I mean, not everybody, wants to have a white-collar job working in an office, and a good thing, because we need a lot of other jobs to get done as well. And there's an irony here. In a lot of industries, there's a shortage of workers for jobs that will pay $50,000 or more. The skill, the welders, the machinists, and the sorts of things that are, they certainly require some knowledge of math, and you can't be an idiot and do those jobs. But they don't require that you go to college. But they require that you do get some training and some skills. And there are a lot of those jobs are vacant. There are openings there that the employers simply can't find them. And so we need to make sure that we don't downplay the quality of the jobs and the lifestyle that you can have with that income, and sort of push everybody into a college track.
David, what are our foreign competitors paying per hour? Do they, and I also would add, they don't really have necessarily the union component either, do they?
It depends on, it varies by country. Some countries have a much stronger union component. And those businesses have higher costs of operating than in the U.S. Not maybe because of the wages, but because of the regulations and so on. So it varies all the way across. We have some countries where the wages are actually higher, but not many. We probably have among the highest wages in the U.S. in the world, but we're not the absolute highest. And some countries that were way behind us a few decades ago are right on par with us, like a country like Singapore, where their wages, their average income is pretty close, if not even higher in many cases. So I think that's an exaggerated problem. The fact that wages are around the world are lower, and that's why we don't have the manufacturing employment. I don't buy that entirely. We've had huge increase in productivity. Our manufacturing output has gone up in spite of the fact that we have a lot fewer people working in manufacturing. But really, what we want to do is take care of the business we can take care of. And I think we've seen a good movement towards that in the past year with the tax bill that we had, with a lot of onerous and not very effective regulations, being pulled back. The energy area in particular has been opened up. And energy is a huge cost for manufacturing. And so the extent that we've been able to keep that down, and we've been adding manufacturing jobs over the past few years. And so that's what we want. We want firms to be able to invest and not worry that if I hire 5 more people, are there going to be a bunch of regulations put on me 6 months from now that's going to make it much more costly, whether it's health care or other workplace regulations. And I think, if you look at polls of business optimism, they're way up and people are hiring. We need to make sure we continue that.
What's the unemployment rate today? 4.1, 4%?
Yeah. I think it was around 4. I think it was just a tick over 4, the last one that I saw.
At this percentage rate, David, are we at the threshold where everybody that is necessarily hireable is hired?
I don't think so. Because we've had a lot of people what are called discouraged workers, and those are people that in order to be counted in the labor force, you have to be willing to take a job and actively looking for one. So we've had what's called the labor force participation rate. That is how many people are actually either working or looking for work, has gone down over the past decade, starting to turn back up. So there are people out there that that maybe aren't as anxious to get a job as the ones that are working. But they will take a job, and we've seen that the labor force participation rate, that is the number has gone up, the number of discouraged workers has gone down, and so we can still draw from that pool. So obviously, the people that are the most anxious and most able to work are the ones that get into the job force first, and at some point, you're going to be getting to people that will have employability problems. But I don't think that's the major problem right now.
What has been the damage or the consequences so far that you can tell on the foreign labor in the United States at this pay rate somewhere between $8 and $15?
You mean the immigrant labor or competition with? Oh, yeah. Well, one of the things people forget is that immigrants also spend their income, and so I'm not sure. Obviously, if you have more people working at the exact same job that you do, it's going to make it tougher for you to get a pay raise. But if we look at the economy overall, I'm not sure that the evidence shows that we are actually hurting our economy by having more people work here. It's if you some of the immigrant labor is very skilled labor. The science, technology, and math people. We've had to actually go abroad to get a lot of them. And they support actually a bunch of additional jobs when they come work for high-tech companies, say. On the other hand, if it's just landscapers coming in with not any particularly marketable skills, that's not going to help people that don't have particularly marketable skills that are already here. I worry though that if we focus maximizing the benefit to people that have low skills, if that's our focus of our economy, we're going to do a lot of damage to the rest of the economy. So we need to be careful with that, I think.
Well, I do know that the immigrant workers certainly spend their money here, but I see staggering numbers, and I don't know how accurate they are, of the kinds of monies that they send back to their home country, those dollars to leave our coffers forever, correct?
Well, no, because what do they do? They have those dollars got to be spent somewhere where people take dollars, and if you look at in the balance of payments, there's something called the capital account, and this is where the money comes back for investment and so on. And
that
pretty much matches the deficit on the trade, on the goods and services. So the reason they're sending money to their relatives in their home country is so that those relatives can buy stuff, and so that money comes back here just in a different path. So I'm
glad to ask these. Yeah, and I am too. That's the reason I necessarily asked the question, because we're told one thing, but I always know that there's another component to the story. So I'm glad that you added that caveat. Now, David, when it comes to robots and technology, there's also this building fear that some kind of artificial intelligence and technology and robotics is going to take the place of labor at the $15 an hour and under sector. Is there a reason for fear in that regard?
Well, it hasn't happened yet, and we've had these fears for centuries. There was a huge fear that the power looms in Great Britain during the start of the Industrial Revolution were going to throw everybody out of work. And in fact, there was a group called the Luddites that went around and smashed the power looms. The Industrial Revolution has been a great boon to humanity. We know that's why we're not living in such mean and desperate lives as people did 2-3 centuries ago. So it's amazing. If you go back and you look, it's almost like every generation there's this fear that technology is going to throw everybody out of work. And so far, all it's done is made people wealthier. Now, that doesn't mean it can never happen. But I think people are going to be better off with artificial intelligence, if we employ it and we have more technology. That has been the history consistently so far. Does it mean we will never have a problem? I can't say that, of course.
And as I told you before, I kind of clicked on here that, I'm a person that wants free markets to decide everything. And I believe that very often, industry is often quite self-regulating because I believe competition makes you, more refined and become a better, well-oiled machine. Right. And I feel like free market should be dictating hourly wage, benefits, titles, how that work is performed. And I'm hoping that we're necessarily going to see some of this because a lot of these regulations have been lifted. So it's kind of given the industry some breathing room, where that hourly rate could go up by itself and not have to comply with, I would say,
right,
public pressure. Am I way off base there, David?
No, I think, and one of the things is when, you and I, when we say free markets, we know what that means. It means free people. A lot of people think it means daddy warbucks and sweatshops. What we want is for people to be able to make their own choices for their own benefit. And that doesn't just include people as consumers, it does include them, but it also includes people as workers and it includes people as employers. Let them make their own choices because they're the ones that have the best idea of what they need. Now, does that not sometimes leave people behind? Sure, it does. But the solution to that would be some other program. If there really are people that are incapable of earning a subsistence wage or even a wage at the poverty level, we have other programs like the Earned Income Tax Credit, or for people that are disabled. We have welfare programs for that. To try to fix that by throwing a monkey wrench into the gears of freedom in our economy that only shrinks the pie, makes it harder to support people that have problems with employability. So yeah, we want people to make their own choices. And why is that? Because we have seen historically, we can look at times when there has been greater freedom and there's more economic prosperity. We can look across countries. We have something here at the Heritage Foundation called the Index of Economic Freedom. And it's pretty consistent. Countries that have more economic freedom, that is where people are allowed to make their own choices, they have higher incomes. The economy prospers. So it doesn't mean it's perfect. It doesn't mean that some people aren't going to need some help. But to try to fix the problem with the wrong tool only makes it worse.
Mm-hmm. Minimum, the unemployment check, I think, is what, $275 a week, and that's the maximum.
You got me on that. Okay.
Well,
I should know it, and I don't. So
that's okay. Well, it is.
Okay.
That's not even minimum wage, David. So
right.
why are the progressives and the left not touting the fact that these people that have to be on some kind of unemployment? I haven't heard any of them say you need to take those unemployment checks up to $8.25 an hour or $11 an hour. I find that fascinating that has always not been.
Don't give them any ideas. So I'm sure there are people who want to do exactly that. And the thing is, we have a whole bunch of programs for income maintenance and subsidies. We have food stamps, or whatever they call them now. We have housing subsidies, we have Medicaid. So there are a lot of ways of people that are that have poverty level cash incomes that get helped, and so their actual ability to consume is significantly above what their income is. So, and that's, you hear that when we look, they say we're not doing enough for the poor people because, say, the unemployment check isn't enough to do this, that, or the other thing, or the welfare payment doesn't do this, or even when they're working. You look at people that are working at the $8.75 an hour will frequently qualify for subsidies elsewhere. And when you take all of that into consideration, a lot more people are above poverty level consumption than are above poverty level income. And the progressives frequently ignore that, as though we aren't already doing a lot. So, but I guarantee you, somebody out there wants to raise the payment for unemployment checks.
Yeah. But it's fascinating to me that that
Yeah.
I've not heard it. I'm sure that, you know,
Okay.
that's been spoken about in the halls of Congress, but it hasn't
Yeah.
come out. And I would say that the conservatives, the Republicans, and those that understand free market, they've lost the messaging because nobody is necessarily talking about capitalism anymore. In fact, capitalism has become a pejorative, right?
You know, and yes, even scarier if you look at the number of 20-year-olds that have a positive impression of socialism. It's huge. You think, oh my gosh, you know, we have the examples all around. You look at, you know, Venezuela, where, you know, they've run that country into the ground. It has the largest oil reserves in the world, and they can't even get them out. You know, the people are starving. The grocery shelves are empty. You know, and it's you know, you always hear, well, look at Sweden. Well, you know, a lot of aspects of Sweden aren't really socialist when you look at the economy. But we can't just say, well, this one country is where we will be. You know, if you look consistently across, again, countries that have less economic freedom, the people are doing worse, including the poor people. And we don't usually see you know, the migrants going to countries where they have a lot of socialism, where you would think, you know, the low wage workers, they want to come here. Why do people, you know, even though those immigrants that don't have much in the way of skill set, you would think, okay, wouldn't they do better in a socialized country that has huge benefits? No, they want to work. They want to get better. They want to go to a place that has opportunity. They don't want to be poor. You know, they don't want to. No, I don't know of anybody whose goal is to be on welfare. You know, some end up that way, and it sometimes traps people, which is a terrible thing. But that's people don't go to sleep at night dreaming about being on welfare.
Or going on vacation and permanently moving to Caracas either.
Right. Yeah, not right now.
No, not at all. Which necessarily takes us right back to the education component, does it not? I mean, we're not. I think somebody needs to take a very, very hard look at what is being taught at the middle school level. So the right seeds are planted in the 6th and 7th grade, and moving right on up with economics classes and government, you know, and they're not anymore.
Yeah, you know, that is a concern, and I'm not. We have specialists here on education that are very, very good. They could give you much better answers on that. I do know that when you look at job training, the roughly 90% of job training dollars comes from private firms. That is, it's done not at our community colleges, and I like community colleges. I don't want to disparage them at all. But so when we see that so much of the job training is done inside firms, we want to make sure that we encourage that that the firms get a reward for that, and when they do generate profit from training people, that we don't tax it away. So I think that's what was good about you know, cutting the corporate income tax. People think, well, you know, you're cutting it for corporations. Well, you know, corporations are owned by our retirement plans. Corporations hire people so they can pay higher wages if the tax rates go down. And we've already seen that. You know, that was much to the chagrin of, you know, all the people on the left saying that this tax bill was slanted only for the rich. You know, that the tax cuts weren't there for the middle income and low income people. Well, it just came in a different form. You know, if you're not paying any income tax, or you're paying very little income tax, you really can't get much of an income tax directly. But you can get the equivalent through higher wages and bonuses, and that's what we're seeing already.
Well, corporations are great places to teach and learn and apprentice and educate and train. And so, you know, they even at the entry level where you can necessarily move on up. But ladies and gentlemen, we've been speaking with David Kreutzler, the Senior Research Fellow at the Heritage Institute for Labor Markets and Trade. I encourage you to travel on over to Heritage and certainly to the Daily Signal, because people like David do some remarkable, you know, short essays on things that are trending and that are happening that otherwise are not hitting headlines. And so, David, we certainly appreciate your insight. And I'm going to call on you again, because I think, you know, as these regulations continue to get lifted, the economic landscape and the industrial landscape in the United States is going to change. So I'm going to call on you to talk about those too.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, and thanks for giving the shout out to heritage.org and the dailysignal.org. I have a lot of colleagues here that are smarter than I am, that have a lot of great stuff to say as well.
All right, thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, more coming your way.
Hi, thank you for listening. My name is Ron Phillips, and I'm the owner and operations manager of Talk America Radio. It is with great pride that I offer you this 24/7 stream of some of the finest talk radio programming in the country, but I need your support. We are a listener-supported network. That means we need your help to continue to offer the quality programming you're hearing right now. If you're able, please visit talkamericaradio.us and click the Support Us button. Your donation will go a long way in helping us continue to share the American voice. Thank you.
This is Don Newen, co-host of the Drive Time Sit Rep. Join me as I call in to my Intel analyst, Denise Simon, for my daily situation report, or Sit Rep, the Drive Time Sit Rep. Check talkamericaradio.us for more information and show times.
Hi, this is Captain Matt Bruce from the Captain's America Third Watch, and you're listening to Talk America Radio, the new dominant force in conservative talk radio.
Hi, this is Donna Fiducia.
And Don Newen from Cowboy Logic Radio. Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't go to sleep every night completely fatigued from trying to restore America from the destruction that is taking place,
then you're simply not doing enough. Join us every Tuesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, for Cowboy Logic Radio.
let the restoration begin.
Donald Trump came to Washington vowing to drain the swamp and make government work for the American people. But the swamp creatures in D.C. aren't going down without a fight, and the deep state is determined to overturn the election and keep their gravy train rolling. In these turbulent times, it's critical for patriots to stay engaged and be prepared to defend this president. You can stay up to date on Trump's battle to make America great again by listening to America First Radio with Jim Dawes each weeknight at 10 p.m. Eastern on the Liberty Feed.
Hi, it's Mark Walters from Armed American Radio. You know, for nearly a decade, I've been educating, informing, and entertaining responsibly armed Americans. And during that time together, we've shared some ups and downs, haven't we? Trump's election saved our Supreme Court and no doubt the future of our gun rights for now. But now is not the time to lay down. The enemies of freedom are well-funded and more determined than ever. To keep up with the state of your gun rights, make sure to tune in to Armed American Radio right here on Talk America Radio, the new dominant voice in conservative talk radio.
This is Denise Simon, host of the Denise Simon Experience. When I'm not debating with Donna Fiducia about politics, I listen to Cowboy Logic Radio. Why, you ask? Because outside of my blog, founderscode.com, and my own radio show, the Denise Simon Experience, Cowboy Logic is by far the most entertaining and informative radio show on planet Earth. Plus, Don makes me feel guilty if I don't listen to his radio show every week.
You cannot retreat to your safe spaces. There are no therapy poodles allowed, especially when facing the truth. And that's just how we like it. Straight, hard, conservatarian talk, on the rocks, no chaser. Served up on the Adrian Slade Show. Small, limited government, constitutional conversations, exclusively on Talk America Radio. Every Saturday morning, 9 a.m. on Talk America Radio Liberty.
You're listening to your local news source, WLBB, News Talk 1330 and FM 106.3.
KTA Digital Dallas. Talk America Radio. Simulcasting on WDDQ, Talk 92.1, Adel, Valdosta, Georgia, and WJHC, Talk 107.5, Jasper, Florida.
And thanks for hanging with us here on the Denise Simon Experience. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming a previous guest and a distant buddy, Fred Gedrich. I call on Fred often because he's got a resume that, speaks to his expertise, and that is as a foreign policy and national security expert, because he, during his time in government, serves the United States in both the Department of Defense and the State Department. And so we're going to be talking about the FISA court. Fred's all over it. So thank you, Fred, for being with us here on the Denise Simon Experience.
Denise, it's a pleasure to join you again today.
Thanks. Let me start off by asking this bizarre question. I would think, given the intelligence committees in both houses of Congress, that the FISA court would actually produce a biannual report on, I mean, they don't necessarily have to get into all the minutiae and all the details, but I would think there would be a biannual summary of cases that have come before the court and the reasons that they're there, so the intelligence community can know what is happening on the backside. Again, they don't have to list names and all the unmasking and all that other kind of cockamamie stuff, but the FISA court, it just operates in complete, almost cloak and dagger, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's the way it's set up. And really, I think the intent of the FISA Act in the beginning was to protect Americans and identities, those that got swept up in some surveillance, from being disclosed to the public, because a lot of those, probably most, are innocent communications with people from other countries. For example, if you're in D.C. Area and you're in the business, someone like I am, it's not uncommon to meet ambassadors from foreign countries, at their missions and give you an update on what's going on. And by the way, what people from the State Department and others in the intelligence agencies are always interacting with those missions. So it's one has to be careful on how that information is handled. Regarding the periodic reports submitted by the FISA court, there are some that I found during the course of my review of information for the article I just published. And basically, they produce summary data, like how many cases were processed during a specific period of time, how many were, how many had questions asked, and how many had to be changed, and how many were rejected. I think, don't hold me right to it, but there's about 1,700 cases, about 300 or so had questions asked about them, and I think 9 were totally rejected by FISA judges. So that information's out there, but what isn't out there are the things a lot of folks are talking about today. That's what is in the application submitted by the Department of Justice and FBI to the court for review so that they can do their surveillance. And that information is held closely to the vest.
So, Fred, if those reports are out there, they do go back to the Department of Justice, or do they go to the
Congress? They submit them to Congress. But it's general information, and Congress has a heck of a time, even though like the Senate and House Intelligence Committees have the oversight responsibility, the American public, to oversee what's going on. It's really hard to pry that information from certain organizations within the government that are involved in the FISA process. And that's what has caused, in fact, a lot of misunderstandings and misstatements by a lot of people. Basically, the root of the problem in this one did in the issue before us on the Mueller investigation is whether the information submitted to the court, I'm talking about the dossier, the Yahoo News report, and the testimony of the Australian ambassador, whether or not it was tainted and accurate, and whether or not it was fully disclosed to the court that it was the Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee who actually paid for that opposition research, which is served as the prime basis to get the court to approve a warrant, which in turn was used to spy on certain elements of the Trump campaign, and also which led to the unmasking of names of some individuals associated with the Trump campaign to the press, and that is illegal. And I haven't seen any movement in that regard on anybody being held responsible for the FISA leaks yet. We don't know whether or not those ongoing investigations have turned into something or been thoroughly investigated by Department of Justice. That's just a big unknown, and that's the way they handle it. Primarily to protect the innocent.
There's been some chatter here, and I haven't heard a lot about it. Not as much as I would think I would if there's any basis to it. And that is that Obama himself actually used Fusion GPS to do opposition research on Romney. Did you hear some of that chatter?
Well, I saw a public report to that effect recently, and it's within the realm of possibility, knowing the many things that happened during the Obama administration, such as the CIA spying on certain Senate staffers,
right,
including the
under
staff
Brennan.
of Dianne Feinstein.
Under Brennan.
Yeah, yes, and some other things. And you really have to wonder about how did the during the confirmation hearings, how did Al Franken know that Attorney General nominee Sessions spoke, to possibly to the Russian ambassador and to ask that question? And one can surmise that it's possible that because of certain things that had happened, that maybe that surveillance encompassed Congress. I'm just speculating based on what happened to Senator Dianne Feinstein's staffer.
Mm-hmm.
One never knows, but one has a right to be skeptical, and that's why it's imperative to get another qualified, independent special counsel to look into all these potential abuses. I think it's in the public interest, and the American people have a right to know whether or not a lot of sinister things being laid on the Obama administration actually happened. And until we get to the bottom of it, we won't know for sure.
I'm not sure I know where the bottom is. Do you? I keep trying to think of, there's something else in play here. I just feel it, and I don't know what that bottom necessarily looks like, although I feel that it certainly goes back to an awful lot of operatives within the Obama administration, such that you're making the argument, and I think rightly so, about a second special counsel as opposed to having another inspector general assigned to this. Can the inspector general, he cannot issue subpoenas, correct?
Well, he can't outside his agency.
Okay.
So he can't compel testimony. And basically, I cover it in the article I just wrote for the American Spectator. Under the IGA Act, he can't convene a grand jury to compel witness testimony. He can't prosecute crimes. He can't interview people who have left DOJ and the FBI. He can't independently investigate matters deemed by the Attorney General or Deputy Attorney General as preserving national security interest or protecting ongoing criminal investigations. And that's a big shield that I found throughout my experience in government service, that a lot of times you'll see during congressional testimony when a principal is up there testifying before Congress and he's asked a question and he says, I can't do it in an open session, or there's an ongoing criminal investigation, I can't talk about it. But it's not always for those reasons that it's hidden. In some cases, like I was just watching Chairman Goodlatte yesterday on one of the talk shows. He says sometimes those two topics are used to shield an agency from embarrassing revelations too. And that's his concern, and that's why he wants to get involved a little deeper on and obtaining more evidence from DOJ that they have to date been unsuccessful in obtaining.
I asked you at the beginning about FISA's biannual reports. and good answer to that. Thank you for clarifying that. Is there one for unmasking?
No, I don't believe so. I didn't. If there is, I didn't come across it. Not in the public domain. Mm-hmm. Now, one can only guess what is beyond the grasp of the public and the congressional overseers. While federal agents, U.S. attorneys, and others are going through their business of investigating various things. But I think there is an argument to be made for keeping certain information secret, and that's above all to protect the innocent, because and that's certainly what you want to do. But what you don't want to do is protect the guilty, and that's what I think the case is compelling for a second counsel to see whether or not certain illegal acts occurred during this whole episode.
So we can't necessarily then apply an inspector general to the unmasking thing, but a special counsel could be assigned to that. What's concerning is it came to the surface that Samantha Power had done, some 200 requests for unmasking as the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. And then she said, well, my name may be on there, but I didn't do it. I think that right there is something is very wrong, because now you're falsifying government documents, correct?
Right. Yep, and that's a matter to be looked in. And technically, she's under the authority of the State Department. She has an office in the State Department and the UN at the time she served, as does Nikki Haley now. But they have a certain amount of independence, too. The U.S. ambassador to the United Nations also is formally considered a member of the cabinet, too. So they wear sort of like two hats there.
Well, then if in fact, with that position, not with necessarily her, but in this case, her being Samantha Power, and the State Department, that tells me that not enough focus has been applied to the State Department. We've gotten some information that Victoria Nuland was part of this equation in the dossier. Same thing with John Kerry, and some other deputy type positions at the State Department. And I don't think enough attention has been applied there. So again, we've got the Inspector General that, I've read a lot of Inspector General reports, and then they start off with why we did this investigation and what our recommendations are, and that's it. And you look at the distribution list to those. In fact, I was looking at one this past Friday on DHS, and those by virtue of even doing those inspections, for whatever reason the IGs are doing them, there's like yippee, there's like no consequence. There's no, you do a recommendation and it's like, oh, okay, we'll clean that up in 2 years' time. But that's it. So, an Inspector General is a good thing, but it doesn't have any teeth to it, correct?
Well, in some cases it does, and here's where it does. It was as a result of the DOJ investigation into the 2016 presidential election. A referral was made after information was obtained and interviews conducted to the Department of Justice to terminate Andrew McCabe, the Deputy Director of the FBI, his employment. And that was actually done, and that was uncovered by the DOJ. Now, let me say something about the Department of Justice Inspector General. He is really highly qualified and well respected, not only throughout DOJ, but the entire Inspector General community and Congress.
You're speaking of Michael Horowitz.
Yes, and by all accounts, he's a man of integrity. And he has a whopping budget totaling nearly $100 million. He has a workforce totaling about 480 special agents, auditors, inspectors, attorneys, and support staffs. And not only that, he was selected to chair the Council of Inspector Generals on Integrity and Efficiency, an organization of 73 inspectors generals throughout the federal government. And so he's a man of prestige. And it's my opinion, and I mention it in my piece, that what should happen is a special counsel should be appointed, and he should use the services of Michael Horowitz and his staff in pursuing the DOJ and the FBI portion of the FICE abuse investigation. I think that would work because anything that would be uncovered could immediately, if necessary, result in the convening of a grand jury, compelling witnesses to testify, and that way they would be able to get someone like a Samantha Power, former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, to testify and to explain to the grand jury exactly what she knew about all the unmaskings. And I think they could go step by step from there to find out if anything illegal happened.
Fred, when it comes to opposition research, this seems to be the real basis of where we are. We can't legislate against opposition research, and I think rightly so. Mm-hmm. However, is there some other cause to relook at what opposition research entails? In other words, it's almost embarrassing that now we have an international scope where we have an Australian component, we have a British component, we have a Switzerland component. I mean,
yes.
It makes the United States, and here's why I asked the question. The State Department, and you know this better than me, but the State Department tries to be of one voice of what the United States of America is really about when we send, U.S. officials outside the United States to do whatever diplomatic duties they are supposed to do or assigned to do. And we try and be of one voice. And we're trying to be cohesive and cogent and blah, 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 on human rights and all these other kinds of things. But now we look especially stupid because of what happened going into the election process. So is there a cause to really look at the scope of opposition research and its international implications?
Oh boy, that's an interesting question because I think with modern technology, the world has grown so small, and you're looking at the World Wide Web and everything that's available on it. It's international in nature, and it would be hard to put a fence around all that or constrain it in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I'm not really. Not necessarily limitations, but you almost have to look at, I guess, some kind of guidance that comes out of the State Department, I guess is where I'm going. I mean, it's an impossible task.
Well, the way I look at it, if you're looking at a presidential campaign, like the Clinton campaign or the Democratic National Committee, which was technically part of the Clinton campaign because the way it was set up, what should have been done if there was an allegation of impropriety and an affidavit was prepared by DOJ and the FBI to submit to the FISA court, there should have been full disclosure on who paid for that opposition research. Apparently that wasn't done. The other thing, as I see it, that's questionable, that needs to be gotten to the bottom of, is whether or not the Clinton campaign and the DNC hired that law firm to disguise the use of campaigns. Yeah, of funds paid to Fusion GPS and Christopher Steele and others to do the opposition research. I think a judge in the FISA court should have been privy to that information before issuing an order, to that it was okay to surveil any individual.
What do you think those judges are thinking right now? Because they obviously have been put in the mix that they've been kind of punked here, to use a diplomatic technical term, punked. So
well, there's so little known about, you know, what they do. I think some of them, you have to assume some were appointed by Republicans and some appointed by Democrats, and you would like to think they all acted and made decisions based on reliable information and integrity and good judgment. I think some of them are having second thoughts if it turns out that an investigation reveals that some of the information presented to them was tainted. And that increasingly looks like to be the case, which gets to the very end. Was any of that information, if it was tainted or not fully disclosed, eventually used as a basis to appoint Robert Mueller as special counsel? In effect, is his investigation fatally poisoned because of potential misdeeds by some of the people within DOJ and the FBI who prepared and submitted the affidavit for a warrant to the FISA court? And I think that's where we're seeing the battle lines drawn before, in the public domain now, with the media, depending on their biases, coming down on one side and others on the other. I
can see the process now of a FISA warrant application being completely scrutinized to the point where any of those judges and the application itself would necessarily need a whole re-examination. Now, that could in fact be done by an inspector general, correct? That part?
The DOJ and the FBI component, the part of it, can be done by the DOJ IG. The DOJ IG, I don't believe, can go into the courts. The courts, something separate. And the DOJ IG can't go to other agencies, such as the Central Intelligence Agency, the NSA, or the DNI. It can't do that, or the State Department, for that matter. That's why I argue for the appointment of a special counsel to blend in with the DOJ IG to be able to do everything that's necessary to expeditiously get to the bottom of this. I think it's of tremendous public interest and importance to do so, and I think sooner rather than later. And it upsets me that Attorney General Sessions appears to be so deliberate, and I can see why he's doing it, but it seems like, having knowledge of how federal criminal investigations work, it's of utmost importance to interview people and to obtain relevant documents if one ever wants to get to the bottom of what may have happened in the FISA abuse allegation case.
I would say this, Fred, and to the listeners, there were a handful of years ago, we never even knew what a FISA court was, and we never understood that whole process, probably rightly so. And I guess the pathetic part about it is that we now know more about it than we necessarily should if things had been operating the way they needed to operate. Ladies and gentlemen, we're coming to the end of our time here, Fred, but but thank you, and come back, because I think it's a topic that we need to kind of continue to probe. And ladies and gentlemen, you can read Fred's article over at theamericanspectator.org. And thank you, Fred.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Stay with us, ladies and gentlemen. More coming your way.
Handle the truth. The Denise Simon Experience. The Truth Matrix. Vetting, exposing, drilling down to the truth.
Rolling Thunder, this is Hitman. Seat over. Hitman, this is Rolling Thunder. Seat out.
The Denise Simon Experience. Exposing politics, lies, demagoguery, spin, fraud.
Grid to suppress, Mike Charlie, 4 Tree 5, 9 or 2 1. Grid to mark, Mike Charlie, 4 7 tree 9er, 8-9er, out.
Promoting individual situational awareness. Question, probe, notice, ask why.
Mark smoke on the deck, 2 rounds HEPT, gas TOT 53U.
And now, the Denise Simon Experience.
Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for hanging with us here on the Denise Simon Experience. We're going to really change gears, and I'm so pleased to be able to talk about this subject. I've got Timothy Snowball with us from the Pacific Legal Foundation. You know, that our favorite legal organization, law firm that just does amazing work. And Timothy's on the case, baby. He's on the case. He's going to help us kind of put things back in context, back to original spirit of things, because he's doing a series of articles here, and I was so pleased that Pacific Legal reached out and said, would you have Timothy on? Timothy Snowball, thanks for being here on the Denise Simon Experience.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Denise. It's my pleasure to be here.
I don't know how you got a Georgetown Law. Is that where you got?
Well, actually, George Washington University.
Oh,
yeah,
okay,
it's pretty much the same thing. That's
same
okay.
thing.
Happens all the time. Second best in the district, but that's okay.
How in the world did you get out of there and be something of a founder's originalist?
well,
how did that happen?
I was one of those kids who couldn't sit still in school, and I remember being kind of a class clown and kind of joking around, and it was really the class that first I remember really sucked me in and got me interested in school was an American history class that I had in, I think it was the 5th or 6th grade. And I remember just being fascinated, and I don't know if they still have classes like this, civics.
No.
I know that public education is always kind of up for debate, but I had just a fantastic history teacher as a kid that got me interested in these ideas, and it carried me all the way through to college and to law school, so I had the benefit of that foundation going in.
Well, go back and shake that history teacher's hand.
I sent her a nice
All
card
right.
thanking her when I graduated from law school.
Oh, good. My son's actually did that once with a couple of his teachers from middle school too. They didn't think he'd amount to much, much less get a call. But anyway, you're doing a series here over at pacificlegal.org, and I invite the listeners to please go over there and look up your work, because you've decided to actually hold your own court here, if you will, on some essays that you're doing on the protection of our rights.
Well, sure. I think that what kind of, and I know that politics is always going to be a contentious, endeavor by virtue of its very nature, but in particular, I think that modern times now it's very divided. And what I wanted to spell out to readers in this series that I'm doing is just that one of the reasons that the United States has been so successful as a country is because of the founding principles upon which the country was founded. And to the degree that the country has moved away from those principles, I think a lot of these divisions and a lot of misunderstandings have been introduced.
Indeed so. You used 2 particular words which struck me when it comes to material benefits of our rights. Mm-hmm. And 2 words that you used were confiscated and redistributed.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And well, I think that the modern, and I'm not sure, again, to go back to public education, whether this is by virtue of kind of an inversion. I think that since the 1930s with Franklin Delano Roosevelt and the progressives, you've really seen a shift. And I don't know if they teach this in schools, but the founders' conception of natural rights is very different than what people would consider to be, in some circles, to be rights today. According to the logic of the founders, natural rights really were the right to be left alone. They were negative rights. They were the rights that you had not to be interfered with by the government or by society. And really what you see since the 1930s and 40s is really an inversion of this idea where you now have the rights are defined as claims that you can make against your neighbor, what your neighbor owes you or what the government owes you. it's no longer the pursuit of happiness, which of course would rely upon individual initiative. Now it becomes people wanting to have a guarantee of happiness, a guarantee of a happy life. And I think that's really not only kind of an aberration from our founding principles, but it's going to be a recipe, I think, for unsustainable debt and other, public malice.
Yeah, I mean, our rights were natural gifts to us. I mean, they're natural protections. But are you putting it back into the 1930s when it somehow got twisted that those gifts, they are now gifts from government?
Sure. And I think that's the real difference and the real danger. If rights and public benefits become gifts of government, then they can be modified or rescinded arbitrarily. But, according to Jefferson and according to the other founding fathers, these gifts, whether it be from, and Jefferson does a really interesting rhetorical thing in the Declaration, he bases natural rights not only in the laws of nature and of nature's God, but also as being self-evident by the very nature of mankind as rational beings. And so if natural rights precede government and exist before government, then the only legitimate function of government is to protect those natural rights. And then Jefferson, of course, goes to the next logical step and says, if a government, fails to achieve this end, then it becomes the sovereign ability of the people to either modify or change that government. And as far as you mentioned in the 1930s, I think you do see. I think that it would be fair to say before Franklin Delano Roosevelt, we had a republic. We had a republic that had existed in a certain form up until that point. And while, of course, there were obviously tragic events like the Civil War with the issue of slavery, and of course that had to be remedied later through that war, unfortunately, and through the passage of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. Up until that point, you still had basically the political science as laid down by the founders. And what you had post-Roosevelt really it would be akin to, I think, an imperial presidency, especially in regards to administrative agencies.
Well, not so much a presidency, but it's an imperial government, right?
So certainly, and the real sticking point, and Pacific Legal Foundation does a lot of work in this area, is really what I had mentioned in terms of what people call the fourth branch of government, which is the modern administrative state. So you've got there are so many administrative agencies now that experts aren't even sure how many there are. Mm-hmm. And not only that, but these agencies have the power to issue rules which have the force of law, to do their own investigations, and to do their own prosecution. So basically they're mixing. The founders, spent such care making sure that the governmental powers were separated, because there was nothing more invitation to tyranny than to have mixed powers, executive powers or legislative powers mixed. They made everything nice and separate and overlapping, and now you've got these agencies that basically run carte blanche, and they have a more direct impact. That's why I always think it's interesting. You watch the news, and people are debating about what happened with the president's latest tweet and all of this. I understand with the 24-hour news cycle, that's bound to happen. But there are things going on in the country that have a direct impact upon people's lives, and it just doesn't. That's why I'm glad to do interviews like this, hopefully to raise awareness and get people more interested in their own liberty.
Well, and I love talking with all of you guys over there at Pacific Legal, because I can tell it's in the belly of your foundation there, and I can see that the spirit of the originalist text and intentions, objectives are permeate throughout Pacific Legal Foundation.
Well, certainly, and for me, it's like I said, with my background, it was really a dream job for me out of law school. But yeah, that's our entire focus, and it's always interesting. Especially, I've been doing some contact with some people, potential clients, in a case that I'm trying to develop. And it's always interesting when you first make contact with people, because they go like, wait, hold on. You said you don't charge for anything?
Yeah.
What? I say no. He said not only do we not charge for anything, we don't charge for any of our services, but our entire institutional goal is to see government limited and restored to its proper constitutional bounds. Because I think a lot of these times, the government comes down on individuals or bureaucrats, come down on individuals, and they think that they can run the clock on them, and that they are not going to be able to put up a fight because they don't have the money or they don't have the time or the resources. And it's so tough. I worked as a public defender for a while, and I saw a lot of unfortunate cases where it was a similar thing, where someone would get picked up for something, and even if there was something questionable going on that we could fight, they went, "Oh my God, I can't spend this money on this bail. I can't put up this fight. Let's just do a plea bargain. I've got to get back to work. I've got to get home, and whatever." And I think a lot of times, with the government coming down on people generally, that's what happens. And like you had said, the Pacific Legal Foundation, we exist first and foremost to vindicate the rights of the individual.
You use another word, and it's government coercion. And what you just described, even in a public defender kind of, it's almost coercion by force. I mean, because people don't have the will, the knowledge, and they are overwhelmed with fear. So that coercion is kind of manifested, correct?
Sure, and I think that you make a great point. This is not necessarily covered in the series that I'm doing, but there's a book called The Law by Frederick Bastiat, and one of the points that Bastiat makes in terms of the law and government is the government, by its very nature, is force. And so if you are going to rationalize or legitimize a government action, you have to be willing to apply the same rationale to that government action as you would to any individual using force against another individual. So, on the one hand, I think that, and it's tough because I think that people are living their lives, and a lot of this stuff kind of goes on in the background. But for people like me, attorneys like me, and professionals, this is what we think about day in and day out. And so when you think about it in terms of that, someone might not think, oh well, if my neighbor breaks the law or doesn't pay their taxes or something, maybe the government should have some authority to force them to do that. That seems legitimate to me. But put it into the same context as, can you imagine if your neighbor took a gun and forcibly went and confiscated money or materials or anything else from another private individual? Or even if they got together in a group, we would say, oh, that's like the mafia, right? But because it has the label government attached to it, it's imbued with a sense of legitimacy that I don't think that people spend enough time thinking about.
Here's a question for you, Tim, that's way out of left field, but I think that for those that are necessarily paying attention to the power and the imperialism of the federal government, they almost become self-regulating to the point where they don't venture out and try and become creative or innovative or inventors, because they just feel that there's going to be too much imperialism getting in their way. So it's impeding other creativity, if you will, because they just don't have the stomach or the will or the time or the money or the resources to go up against an EPA or Department of Interior or anything else. So it becomes stifling to growth, does it not?
No, I absolutely would agree with you. And I think that when you look at the history since the founding up till now, many of the specific problems that the founders were trying to avoid with the new government that they were building have unfortunately come to pass. You know what I mean? And it's an example that I always like to use from the Declaration of Independence is, of course, Jefferson starts the Declaration talking about generally, the right of people to, natural rights and the right to form government and the legitimacy of government through the consent of the governed. But then in the second part of the Declaration, he goes through and he lists specific reasons, specific grievances that the colonists had with the King of England, of the Parliament. And one of those basically describes the modern administrative state. Like the king has sent out swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their sustenance. It's like exactly one of the things the founders were trying to avoid has unfortunately come to pass. And I think it really starts with public awareness, and there's just, I think a part of that, like you had mentioned, is public education. But I think it's unfortunate. I don't watch the news anymore. As a younger man, I used to love to watch the news. I think that I would go back and forth. I would I'd watch a little Fox News, and I'd watch a little MSNBC, and I'd throw a little CNN in there, and I'd always thought that if I kind of went through all the networks, I'd kind of have a rounded perspective on what was going on. And I can't watch it anymore. I think that it's become almost just so manufactured and so, it's almost unwatchable for me. And I think that unfortunately most people get their diet of news and commentary from these networks. And the talking heads on there, these aren't these are entertainers. They're entertainers. And
Tim, this is really kind of funny because I've always wanted to watch either a college football game or an NFL football game with, coaches that know much more about the game than I do. And I know a good bit about the game. I mean, I have 5 televisions on the walls and watch college game day.
Right.
Okay. But it would be a whole lot of fun to be watching the news with you, a lawyer, to do the commentary. I mean, it's almost the same kind of model. To have you lawyers over at Pacific Legal go, can't do that. That's not true. It didn't work that way. I mean, what fun it would be. So you got.
You turn on CNN. And they're talking about, the first lady, what pair of shoes she's wearing, or Trump, what his vacation, how many vacation days he's taken, and I go, who cares? There's so much going on in the country and in the world that deserves our attention, and it's become, I think that the news, I wasn't alive when Walter Cronkite and some of the the kind of the classical journalists had their nightly news reporting or whatnot, but from what I gather, it was a lot different than CNN trying to fill up their day with news in air quotes, right? That really has nothing to do with anything. It's just purely entertainment. And so, like I had said, I think that it's my pleasure to do interviews like this. And the work that we do here at PLF, because really part of our goal, one of our main goals, is not only to win in the courtroom, but to be persuasive in the court of public opinion and to generate awareness of the work we do, but also what individuals can do in their daily lives to kind of push back against this nonsense.
Well, earlier and we hear this from time to time, but it's quite rare. Consent of the governed, and that is the model. That is where we're supposed to be. But yet, when there is, we can't read an omnibus bill. We can't read a 9,000-page Obamacare piece of legislation. One is that the members of Congress don't even get it but like 4 hours before they're supposed to vote on it. We don't get it at all. So, there is no consent of the governed, I would argue. True or false?
Sure. And I think that's an argument that can be made, but I'll give you an interesting example to kind of bolster the point you made. So you had mentioned specifically the Obamacare bill that was passed, right? So the reason that Congress, I'm just kind of going to get a little historical, but originally the first Constitution, when the Constitution was enacted, there was no Bill of Rights attached to it. And the idea with there not being no Bill of Rights was we've got these powers listed, specifically listed here for each branch of government. If it's not listed here, then there's no power for them to do it. So there's no power here for Congress to pass a health care bill. Why would we have to have something specifically written saying they can't do that? And of course, during that time in the founding, there were the Federalists who supported the Constitution, and there were the Anti-Federalists who were more skeptical of the new government. So to appease the Anti-Federalists and to bring them on, a Bill of Rights was enacted and approved, right? But one of the points is like Obamacare. So you have a series of cases back in the 40s that interpreted the Commerce Clause. Now, the Commerce Clause was originally enacted so that the federal government could step in and prevent states from passing like tariffs or taxes upon other states' goods, right, to make sure that there was open and fair commerce among the different states in the country, right? So that's the original purpose of the Commerce Clause. You've got a series of cases that have interpreted that clause to mean if it has any effect whatsoever upon commerce, then Congress has jurisdiction to legislate in that area. So you can take Obamacare as an example. There's nothing in the Constitution empowering Congress to pass laws affecting national health care policy. It's only been through this horrible Commerce Clause jurisprudence that Congress can claim this power. And so it's all kind of connected, and you've got this rolling ball, I think, of just constitutional dysfunction. That there have been victories, but the fight to restore the republic is ongoing.
There's about 6,000 places I want to go with you here before we get into the second segment.
Sure.
Because I am going to hold you over. So I'll do a shorter question. We're supposed to be able to have the ability to the term is throw off the government. And of course, as soon as you say something like that, we become anti-government, activists and insurrection and, all those other kinds of things. But I don't believe the Americans today know enough to know what their resources are to throw off the parts of the imperial government. Do you?
Right. Well, I surely wouldn't, of course, recommend taking up arms against the government or anything. But while that was one of the purposes of the Second Amendment, what I would say is that Jefferson, just to bring it back to the Declaration, does make a point right around the same section when he's discussing the consent of the governed and the right to throw off government. Is he says something along the lines of people are predisposed to suffer harms while they're sufferable. And we should not do away with governments long established for fleeting reasons. I have hope in the restoration of the American Republic. I think that there are people working to that end every day. But what I would say is, all politics is local, and unfortunately, there's going to be things going on with the federal government that Pacific Legal Foundation and other organizations are going to be in a better position to fight. But, you help out where you can. Now, whether that's talking to your kids about the American founding, whether it's discussing it with your neighbors, whether it's, reading an article like the series that I'm writing and sharing it on your social media. Do what you can, and especially in those local elections and those local, governments where you can have a more direct role. Go to the city council meeting. Go to the school board meeting. And do what you can in your own community, I think, because I think that communities have more of a direct impact than, at least by design, than faraway Washington should or can.
Well, clearly, discussing an awful lot of the cases with the lawyers at Pacific Legal. I mean, you guys are doing that kind of local work that does have an impact in other states. And so we have discussed a lot of those cases. So that is, the model that you guys are using, and it is, I would say, effective to the point where other lawyers, other cases that are quite similar are watching this and necessarily would not advance because they already, you've already got a decision. So, that's the good part.
Yeah, I think the Pacific Legal Foundation really sets the standard for what a principled public interest law firm looks like, right? And we are willing to advocate and litigate any issue in any court, all the way from local courts at the state level, all the way up to the United States Supreme Court, where we actually just had a case heard last month regarding the First Amendment, and we actually just got news a couple of weeks ago that another one of our cases was accepted at the United States Supreme Court. And it's a real honor because I think that the number of cases that the court decides to hear out of their total number of petitions is something like 1%. So to have multiple cases granted in the same term, I think really is a testament to the work that we do and how important it is.
Boy, so do I. All right, we're coming into a break. We're going to hold over Timothy Snowball, Pacific Legal Foundation, because on the other side of this break, I want to talk about redressing grievances. So everybody, take a deep breath. We'll be right back.
Hi, thank you for listening. My name is Ron Phillips, and I'm the owner and operations manager of Talk America Radio. It is with great pride that I offer you this 24/7 stream of some of the finest talk radio programming in the country, but I need your support. We are a listener-supported network. That means we need your help to continue to offer the quality programming you're hearing right now. If you're able, please visit talkamericaradio.us and click the Support Us button. Your donation will go a long way in helping us continue to share the American voice. Thank you.
This is Don Newen, co-host of the Drive Time Sit Rep. Join me as I call in to my Intel analyst, Denise Simon, for my daily situation report, or Sit Rep, the Drive Time Sit Rep. Check talkamericaradio.us for more information and show times.
Let me talk to you, black people. When you vote for blacks and put them in office under the banner of the Democrat Party, please explain to me what black people get as a result. This was not a nap that we have been taking. We are in a coma. You know what the interesting thing about pensions is? That's today's money given to people who ain't doing nothing for you today. Get off that black Democrat tit that they've been sucking on. Your country is being stolen from you, and the promise is being stolen from your children, and they're telling you it's all right while the rest of the world is trying to lap us. Well, why are we doing so poorly? 2 words: teachers' unions. Are you kidding me?
Black Man Thinking, Monday nights, 9 p.m.
This is Denise Simon, host of the Denise Simon Experience. When I'm not debating with Donna Fiducia about politics, I listen to Cowboy Logic Radio. Why, you ask? Because outside of my blog, founderscode.com, and my own radio show, the Denise Simon Experience, Cowboy Logic is by far the most entertaining and informative radio show on planet Earth. Plus, Don makes me feel guilty if I don't listen to his radio show every week.
You're listening to your local news source, WLBB, News Talk 1330 and FM 106.3.
KTA Digital Dallas. Talk America Radio. Simulcasting on WDDQ, Talk 92.1, Adel, Valdosta, Georgia, and WJHC, Talk 107.5, Jasper, Florida.
And we're back, ladies and gentlemen, having a fascinating discussion here with Timothy Snowball at Pacific Legal Foundation on our rights, those gifts that the government keeps on giving and then taking and not protect. Well, anyway, and Tim is writing a whole series here over at pacificlegal.org, and I certainly invite you to go, 1, subscribe, and 2, while you're there, grab these essays that he is doing and share them far and wide. But Tim, before we went to break, I wanted to I kind of let out a little clue that we were going to go to redressing grievances, and that is one of, I think, our biggest protections. Yet I haven't seen a court yet that has accepted a case on redressing grievances, especially at the Supreme Court level. Am I wrong?
No, not to my knowledge. I think that when it comes to that type, I think that would probably fall under speech. I know there's a couple of cases that allow the government to regulate what they call time, place, and manner of public protests. So I know that kind of plays in, and that's kind of a check, or kind of a limitation upon what you see is so interesting as an attorney, or when you start kind of studying the law, is you've got kind of the original foundation of whether it be the Constitution or statutes, and you have once the statute is kind of applied, courts step in and they start crafting all of these alternative tests and different exceptions and different things, and it kind of gets away from the original meaning. I think, of course, within the context, like you mentioned, of the First Amendment, I don't think that the founders had some kind of violent protest in mind. The word peaceably is right there. And but at the same time, they don't mention any specific exceptions. I think that's something that comes in later, from the court.
All right. Here's what you need to do, Tim. You need to grow a beard, and then you need to play the role of Jefferson, because just for a second, because in front of you is a permit to hold a event on public space, and you have filled out the permit that you have in front of you has all of these things, the time and the place, who's did blah 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 blah, and here's a check for $10,000.
Well, funny, and this is a little kind of on topic, but I actually have a beard. I have a 4-month beard. I have a 4-month beard going right now because I'm going with my girlfriend to a thing at Disneyland where I'm playing a pirate. So I've got the I've got the 4-month beard going right now.
Okay.
But I think that to your point, I mean, and this is something kind of interesting that I remember studying when I was in college. I was a political science major, so there's something called public choice theory. And if I had to boil it down to its essence, public choice theory would say this: look, human beings operate based upon incentives. You know what I mean? If you incentivize a certain individual or a certain industry, it reacts that way. Now, there seems to be kind of an assumption or theory based upon democracy that, anybody who gets involved with public office, anyone who wants to be a public servant, they must be motivated by high ideals and selflessness, and they're just really in it for the community or for the public to help them out. Now, I don't discount that in the minds of people who dedicate themselves to public life. I mean, that surely motivates me, but at the same time, just because you're a politician or just because you're in public office doesn't mean that regular incentives don't apply to you, right? And so more often than not, you see politicians and you see bureaucrats and different individuals acting as you would expect any other individual to act. And just because they're a politician doesn't mean that they're suddenly imbued with some divine purity, right? It's like Madison says, if men were angels, no government would be necessary. And so I think that a lot of times when you're looking at Congress or you're looking at any public individual, I think people will say, why don't they just do X, or why don't they just do Y? And you have to understand, first and foremost in the mind of a congressman is retaining their office and keeping their seat. And everything else is filtered through that prism. And, on the flip side of that, bringing in donation dollars. You don't bring in, I think what is the average House race, I think, is over $1 million now.
Well, you can't, you don't even get recognition from the party unless you've got $1 million in donations.
Right. And so I had spoken to people in the past that had worked on congressional campaigns or worked in the offices of members, and they said, God, guess how much? It's like 50% of the day is spent just calling donors and just trying to pitching yourself to donors. They said, how much room does that leave for study or for deliberation or for looking into issues or for advocacy? I think that the model that the founders kind of had in mind with the House of Representatives especially was, that there were going to be interested citizens who were, obviously rising from, local localities and wanting to volunteer their time and go to Washington part-time. It wasn't supposed to be a full-time job.
Right.
And represent their districts and do what was best in terms of, channeling the wishes of the district or their constituents to the new federal government, right? And I think that, now you've got professional politicians and they're spending 50% of their time on donation calls. And it's kind of a perversion of the system, I think.
Well, and that's precisely right. That's why I think in a lot of cases that the staff people that these members of Congress have are the ones that that they are the true workhorses. And I would say that probably Senator Grassley has probably the best set of staffers that in the entire system. They just do remarkable work, because I know somewhere around 4:00 in the afternoon, I think, or I don't know, whatever time it is kind of a weird deal. He takes off. He'll leave a hearing. I gotta go. I gotta take my nap, and he has said it in hearings. I gotta go, and I'll be back later, kind of thing. But
right.
I want to circle back to, because your article mentions, this is kind of fascinating, women's rights, gay rights, minority rights. that are granted, modified, and restricted. So all of a sudden we have classified groups, people, and then we have given those groups, some activist charter, if you will.
Right.
So women's rights are now separate and distinct from those of Cocker Spaniels, and you know what I mean? How in the go there for me, will you?
Sure. I think that yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of that arises from the fact that a lot of these groups were not on equal footing at the founding, right? And so I would be the first one to admit that the founding fathers, they weren't perfect men. They probably weren't even perfect politicians. And the Declaration of Independence, and the Constitution that it embodies its principles, they're not perfect documents. They are statements of our highest ideals. But I think the story of America has been the story of ever expanding freedom, and the fact that there were groups and individuals who, because of historical norms, I always think it's so interesting and kind of silly to apply modern standards to the actions of historical figures, right? Because in 100 years from now, in the future, there could be some new standard of social norm that develops, and they could be looking back on us in 2018 and saying, "Oh, look at those barbarians. They drank Coca-Cola or something," or it could be anything, right? And so, I think when it comes to these different individual groups now who are claiming specific, categorized rights, a lot of that has risen by virtue of there being ongoing struggles for different civil rights for different groups. But at the same time, I don't look at that as expanding new rights. I don't look at it as a constitutional defect. I think that the Declaration and the Constitution embody as their highest principles the equality of all individuals and the rights to life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness. And subsumed within those categories are the rights of every man, woman, and child in the country. And so rather than this historical progression being an aberration or an improvement upon the Constitution or Declaration, I rather see it being a fulfillment of its ideals.
All right, here comes another one way out of left field.
Hit me with it. I'm ready.
Okay, I like it. In the pursuit of happiness, I think someone also has that ability, or necessarily should have that ability in their job. And so, we have civilian jobs, but I'm going to travel on over to government jobs, because I think that, there are certain rights within the government employee should necessarily have, and I'm going to go down to whistleblower protections, because I believe that the government is actually, confiscating certain rights within performance. And so whistleblowers, we have laws on the books that say we want you here. Here's a toll-free number. You can do it anonymously, all these other kinds of things. And so even as a whistleblower, where you want to do the right thing and blow this whistle on whatever, that even that is a redress of grievances within the system, and they're being torpedoed.
I think that's fair to say. It's not my area of expertise. But what I will say is, when you have I forget who the names were the most recent. Was it Bradley Manning, and Edward Snowden? I think that they were the most recent kind of leakers of classified material. On the one hand, you look at their crimes, and on the face of the statutes under which they were charged, they pretty plainly broke the law in that case. But when you see the kind of information, the documents that were coming out, and just to bring it back to the foundation constitutional principles, the President of the United States and the executive branch were never meant to be imperial powers, right? Very specifically written into the Constitution is the fact that if the United States is going to go to war, then it requires a formal declaration of war by Congress, right? Congress was intended to be the most powerful branch in the federal government, right? And the fact that now you have a situation where the president, whoever holds the office, can pretty much declare war, go to war. I mean, I was reading the other day how long we've been in Afghanistan. I mean, I think that we went to the war in Afghanistan. Has it been 17 years or something?
Yep.
And I was a senior in high school when we went to war in Afghanistan, and you've got this perpetual state of war now that doesn't even seem to have a goal or have anything, any endpoint in sight. And you've got young men and women who are joining the armed services, desiring to serve their country. They're being sent to these open-ended wars. So I think on the one hand, those leakers, probably on the letter of the law under those statutes, I've got to look at it a little closer, are probably guilty of what they've been charged with. But at the same time, the law is not meant to always be applied, rigidly, right? And there's something in the legal circle called equity. And there used to be two separate courts, equity and law. But I think that in certain cases like this, where this information is important for the public to assess what the government is doing, so it might be one of those exceptions.
Yeah, to your point, when it comes to war, I mean, now we've got people going into the military service that are fighting the same enemy their fathers fought. Anyway,
right.
That's just a sidebar.
Well, just to make one more point, I think that this might be a good kind of summation of the articles that I'm writing, kind of my views on these questions in general. Is I thought it was fascinating that when President Obama was in office and was doing constitutionally questionable things, you had all the Republicans on the right saying, "Oh my God, this is unconstitutional. We have to do something about this." And you had all the Democrats on the left saying, "Oh, he's just trying to get things done, and Congress isn't cooperating, and he needs to do this and take charge." Right? Then you have a Republican come into office, and it is the exact opposite. With the Republicans saying, "Oh, Trump's just trying to get things done, and he, whatever," and the Democrats, crying foul, right? My point is, if you're going to be have constitutional fidelity, if your loyalty and your focus is on the Constitution of the country and the rule of law, then it should not matter who is in power and who holds a specific office. An unconstitutional action is an unconstitutional action, period. And there's a reason that our government was set up the way that it was. And so it should not matter, whether or not you, enjoy a particular policy or you support a particular policy that's enacted unconstitutionally. You're now betraying the very principle that you wish to use to stifle the next person who comes into office and has a different letter by their name. And so really I think that kind of all comes together is that the partisanship, that principle should be placed before partisanship.
Did I hear you right when you said that Congress or the legislative branch was meant to be the most powerful of the branches?
Oh, absolutely. The fact that it was entered under Article 1, the first article in the Constitution, that wasn't by accident. And you really have seen over time another historical trend where Congress has been willing to give up more of their power, whether it be to the executive branch or to other agencies of the executive branch. Really, and it's a strange kind of side effect, I think, to the fact that there's so frequent elections in Congress, especially in the House of Representatives, that you've seen kind of this incentive. Again, incentives affect everyone. This incentive of these democratically elected members to kind of punt the ball and to kind of put the other decision-making powers onto other individuals as a means of avoiding the consequences for those policies. Something Madison did not foresee.
Timothy, we were There was a hearing that I happened to stumble across, and I'm thinking it was probably 4 or 5 years ago. It may have even been longer. The House something committee held. They had a panel of 3 lawyers, and one of them was Jonathan Turley, which we've come to know here recently because he's on TV a lot. And there was then another lawyer that was out of South Florida, and then a third one that escapes me. But the entire hearing, fascinatingly enough, was held during the Obama administration because there was such desperation of the House side of Congress was looking for answers. Did they need to pass a law to reassert their place in government, because the Obama administration had so abused the legislative branch, which really, I've never forgotten that hearing, because it spoke to how the executive branch and all of the other agencies, if you will, essentially destroyed the people's house, if you will, meaning those that that are there to represent us, the consent of the governed. I don't see that there's been any correction, and I almost believe that there should necessarily be a piece of legislation that goes back and reasserts the power of the House of Representatives.
Oh, absolutely, and I'll tell you, I had the pleasure of studying with Professor Turley. He's actually a law professor at George Washington University, where I got my law degree. And so I don't know Professor Turley, but I know of him, and I actually think I recall the specific hearing that you were talking about, and I think that Professor Turley made a point very similar to my own. He said, look, he says, some of these policies that have been enacted unilaterally by the Obama administration are policies that he personally had spent decades wanting to see enacted.
Sure.
But that wasn't the point. The
Correct.
point was
Correct.
They did not do it constitutionally.
Correct.
And you cannot complain about the actions of a president who you don't like doing unconstitutional things when you're more than happy to suffer the same types of unconstitutional actions for a president whose policies you support. It just doesn't work that way. No, I definitely agree with your point. I forget who it was. It was either Ted Cruz or I think maybe Rand Paul. Someone had several years ago suggested that maybe we should have to tie our bills when we're going to pass a new piece of legislation. We should have to specifically cite to the Constitution for the authority.
Yeah,
for the authority
Michelle
to do
Bachmann
that.
was part of that. Yes.
Was it? Or maybe we should. It was either that, or I think maybe they said also we should have to stand here and read the legislation. And like you mentioned, some of these bills, go hundreds and hundreds of pages, right? And it seems like at the very least, I forget who it was. I remember seeing a few years ago a representative saying, we can't read the bills. Like, do you know how long it would take for us to read the bills? We just, you go in, you kind of.
We have lawyers for that.
Yeah, you kind of try to get an idea what it's about, and then you just vote.
And most of them aren't written by legislators anyway. They're written by lobbyists, and
Right.
here's a check to accompany the draft.
Right, absolutely. So.
Then
I do think. Yep, sure. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, now we have activists.
Mm-hmm.
They're going from the sublime to the ridiculous, and then we've come to not like lobbyists, but lobbyists are First Amendment types. I mean, lobbyists used to, meet the president, at the hotel behind the White House every afternoon. Hence, the word lobbyist was created in the lobby. Have a drink, have a beer.
Right. And I think there are certain theories in political science. I think that one of them is called pluralism, that actually says that you want there to be lobbyists, you want there to be more public interest groups, because ultimately every lobbyist represents thousands upon thousands upon thousands of supporters for a given issue, and that if you're going to have a participatory democracy, then that's a good thing. The more voices, the better. They call that, I think that's called the marketplace of ideas. The more voices, the more voices you have speaking, the more participation, the better that will be for democracy. But something interesting to your point, I can't recall the name of the study right now, but there was a study that I remember reading while I was in college, and it was one of the most surprising ones that I ever came into contact with, that actually said they had gone through and they had empirically looked at it, and they had said, while the common argument would be, okay, look, these lobbyists or these special interests are pouring money into certain politicians' pockets, and then the politicians are responding accordingly and voting according to what the lobbyists want. But the study had an interesting conclusion, is that when they actually looked at the money that was flowing to given politicians from certain interest groups, what you actually had was money flowing to politicians who were already predisposed to support the position of the group. So rather than seeing politicians flip their votes and vote a different way than they previously had based upon money, what you had was a consistency among that, because Representative X, for instance, is a consistent vote on gun rights, and we're a gun rights organization, therefore we're going to support the campaign of Representative X. And it was a really interesting thing. I remember being in a discussion group in college when this article came up, and some of us just couldn't believe it, because it's like, some political myths just get perpetuated, and then you have kind of results of a study like this that kind of cut against that common sense understanding of, and actually don't support what that understanding would be.
This has been a very engaging conversation we've been having with Timothy Snowball at the Pacific Legal Foundation, who is writing a series of articles. I'm going to make sure that Colin, your schedule here, pings me for you to come back, because with the next release, there's so much more to cover here. We're actually holding a civics class here on the Denise Simon Experience, and I'm just very, very grateful to this, because we're talking in terms that in right to the heart of the matter that people just don't necessarily get or understand, and we're talking past each other, but here with you, we're getting down to the fine notes, and very, very grateful for your time, Timothy.
Well, I really appreciate it, and it's my pleasure, and I'm going to continue to write this series. I think there'll probably wind up being about 10 in total that when I finish, and I'm on number 2, writing number 3 now. So I encourage anyone who's listening to go to pacificlegal.org or to search me up on Twitter or one of the other social media sites, and keep in touch. And
excellent.
Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for being with us on the Denise Simon Experience. We'll see you next time.